Greetings, creepers. This, of course, is Dr. Leech, the Leech Doctor from DailyNightmare.com, and we're going to talk about the 4 or 5 things that we mean when we say Midwest snob horror. I know that the word snob is not, traditionally a positive term, and in effect, we are reclaiming something that I've been thrown at, a term we've been thrown many times in the past. We don't necessarily like everything that it passes for horror. In fact, we didn't really want to use the word horror. I think the banner over at the site right now is Midwest Sublime, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But the best way to get an idea of what we're talking about with what we do is our very name, Daily Nightmare. We first got the idea of just sharing nightmares that folks had. And these are everyday nightmares. These are dreams that everybody has every now and then, They are things that terrify you for inexplicable reasons. You'll wake up. This is actually a common theme among the folks when they write in with their nightmares. It's like, I'm not able to convey why this was scary to me. That's exactly what we're interested in. We're interested in that sort of uncanny feeling of why rationally shouldn't be afraid of this, and yet I am. Waking up and I have this insane, sometimes bizarre dream. That's the stuff that really interests us. The notion of a phobia, something that is an irrational fear, something that part of your brain can realize that there's something not that scary about this, and yet the rest of you can't stop being afraid. We are not anti-science in any way, and in fact, we are, in a very real sense, science is my girlfriend. I'm so into the notion of dispassionate inquiry. The trouble is that so much of our lives, I believe, we don't think about because we are terrified to think about them. That's what's intriguing to me. So we like nightmares, we like phobias, and we like things in culture that remind us of those. Another way of talking about this is in terms of the sublime. Like I said, we toyed with the idea of calling ourselves the Midwest Sublime, except no one knows what the heck that means. And boy, is that a snobby thing to say. Sublime, in the way we're talking about it, is an aesthetic theory concept that goes back to the Greeks, at least to the Greeks. There may have been discussions of this before, around campfires and what have you. But the sublime, as it reemerged in the modern era, was, with Immanuel Kant and his aesthetic theory. And it's the sense that there are things that are aesthetic, profoundly moving in an aesthetic level, that are not beautiful at all. Initially, that was thought to be only things of nature could be sublime in this sense of awe in the pit of your stomach that you don't really know what this is. It's compelling and it's disturbing at the same time. There's the sense of that huge wave that could wash you away, or the sense of climbing up a mountain and not knowing if you are going to fall into this awesome grandeur. So the sense of awe. And that certainly relates to a lot of the stuff we do with bones, don't you know, and the dead things, and the and sort of the things that we don't like to talk about. The sublime also was a notion of when it became swallowed up by the Romantics and to being something we could talk about with like Baudelaire and things that we could actually create products that were like. That, I think, is actually the high art, the auteurist, dare I say, strain of horror that we totally go into. It's that sort of overwhelming sense of dread and expectation for something horrible to happen, and the little things that it grabs onto inside of us. So related to this also is the notion of shadow work. I suppose my friends who work magic and neo-pagans would call it shadow work. And that is the sense of despite our best intentions, there is a psychic sensor, I've heard it called, in the back of our brains that sort of stops us from doing stuff. It is our shadow. It is the thing that is it is our adversary in the sense of the shaitan, of something that is working against us, even though it is totally us. We are our own worst enemies, and that's an aspect I'm really intrigued about. How are we our own worst enemies? What's the constitutive elements of that in our psyches and in our lives, and anything that can dig that up, anything that evokes that, that's I'm totally interested in. We have articles based on those uncanny senses that you have in certain places, in certain viewing certain products. There are things that just ain't normal about humans. We like to think that we are rational actors. Maybe sometimes we are, not all the time. Another sense that of this snob horror, if you will, is the notion of tragedy in the old Greek sense, of the sense of the you maybe had to read some of these things in school. Sophocles and Aeschylus especially. Euripides is getting a little bit away from what we're thinking of. We're thinking of things that are so primal, so disturbing, that they cause, well, as Aristotle said, an effusion of like fear and pity, Elios and Phobos. And I think he was totally whacked in his notion of what that accomplishes, because the catharsis, I think, is the least of what happens when you see something that gives you this sense of awe and terror and amazed wonder. I don't think it goes away like catharsis is talking about. That seems a little too suburban, frankly. Some of this stuff bothers you forever. Some of it, talk to the number of folks who maybe were your grandparents' age who saw Psycho for the first time. How long was it until they took another shower? We probably have different things in different generations about what has elicited that emotion so strongly that we have modified our behavior just to not have to cope with it. That's the sense of tragedy in the sin is me, from Sophocles, the Oedipus Rex. That is it's really intriguing that Freud grabbed a bunch of his psychological categories from the Greek myths. It's because they were talking about things that were so deeply internal to us. And there are other theater theorists who have done highly similar stuff. Antonin Artaud in the modern era probably is the most notable. He thought that theater should be the gestures of someone being burned alive in a fire. And that's pretty close to what we're talking about too. These things that are on the border, that sort of swither in and out. Yes, sure, you can be a professional artist and do this kind of stuff. I'm sure this stuff happens a lot in galleries. I'm more interested in when it is just on the borderline. Just when it's not, when you don't know whether this is a play or some crazy person talking to themselves. When you're not certain if this is an artwork or just some, feces scrawled on the wall. That's closer to what we're talking about with this snob horror. Because this isn't the franchised, easily packaged, easily consumed horror of the franchise horror movie, for instance. It's not even... It doesn't actually fit even well within the literary genre of horror. There are so few horror writers... Oh, this is a horrible thing to say. I don't like very much. There's just really little that I like. So I tend to go off on the stuff I really do like. If there's a literary genre that we celebrate more than just traditional horror, it would be the bizarro or new weird stuff. Things that you really don't know what you're reading. How does that fit in my brain categories? Please scramble my brain categories. That's why That's why I'm here looking at art, why I'm not off living my life. I'm interested in culture that will help me become a more vibrant, not so complacent human. That's sort of what we're talking about. I think that was 4 or 5 in there, wasn't it? Depending on how you... Well, yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm sure we'll parse it up there for the SEO, don't you know? This is an ongoing discussion, of course, because people waylay me all the time and say, snobs, these aren't snobs, rah, 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 rah. Yeah, and like I said, we've tried different categories, different words to evoke this. I think we're sticking with snob horror for a while, because at least it starts a conversation, don't you know? I'm Dr. Leech, the Leech Doctor of DailyNightmare.com. Hey, stop over at the site. See what we're talking about now.